Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Bible study here at Calvary Baptist Church. What a wonderful, wonderful blessing it is to have you join us tonight, especially tonight, because this is our last Bible study for the year 2020. We won't be back with you again until the 6th of January, and we'll do what we normally do at the beginning of each year. We always open with a large prayer service, and so we want to thank you for your consistency and your faithfulness as you've been doing all year long. And so we just thank you for that. It is not a preference of mine to take the break, but I want to make sure that we give our staff some time off and that they work hard behind the scenes to make this happen, especially since COVID has jumped off. So we want to just give them some time to themselves to hit the reset button, take a breath, and get ready for the new year. So, and it also gives me an opportunity to take a little bit of a break as well. So it's very therapeutic for us to be able to do so. The next thing I will remind you is, again, as I've been saying repeatedly, please be sure to make sure that you're not relaxing any of your safety protocols as it relates to COVID-19. I know we're coming up on holidays. Many of you have COVID anxiety and you want to get together with people, and that's just not a safe thing to do. Just not a safe thing to do, especially at this point, this juncture. I know our governor has imposed some new restrictions that will go into effect on Monday at 8 o'clock, even as it relates to gatherings for Thanksgiving. So just be mindful and be careful. You may be okay, you may be able to handle it, but it's possible that you can pass COVID to somebody who is immunocompromised or who has comorbidities and unable to handle having COVID, and it could be very deadly for them. Just be mindful of your movements as we move into this holiday season. And just know that we are praying for you. Even though Bible study will be in recess, just know that we will not stop praying for you in that regard, because we know that this is also a time of the year when depression hits a high point and people begin to fall into states of frustration and all of those kinds of things, especially as we come out of and as we continue to deal with, COVID-19. So just know that we will be still praying for you, even though we will not be in Bible study. We will still be praying for you, praying for your strength and your encouragement. And of course, our Sunday services will continue live every Sunday as well. So just stay tuned, and we have some other things that will be happening virtually, and so just stay tuned for those things. I want to jump into our lesson here tonight just to kind of bring or wrap up some of the information that we've been sharing with you. And let me just suggest to you that this may not be the end of this. We may be coming back to this when we come back in session on January, so just kind of be prepared. Just depends on how far we get where we are into the lesson. So I want to continue our conversation on hearing all the voices. Hearing all the voices. Again, on your screen, there are some information about the various generations, so you'll know kind of where you fall, whether you're in Generation X, whether you're a millennial, whether you're a baby boomer, whether you're a traditionalist, whatever. Maybe you're part of that greatest generation. So wherever you fall, you can check that out on the screen. We spent a portion of our last discussion looking at some biblical examples of what I call generational collaborations. Generational collaborations, that's where we spent some of our time. We talked about the original intent of God for us to complement rather than compete with one another. We talked about gifters and lifters, if you remember, which refers to the fact that we can all benefit when generations work together. One group can provide the wisdom and the experience, while another group can be the manifestation of movement. And so in some cases, you may have those who've been through some things, who know how to do some things. And so they provide you that wisdom and experience. And then you have those who are younger who are able to take those experiences, flesh out those experiences, and turn them into action, and turn them into ministry. So just kind of keep that in mind. The last thing any church wants to be is stuck. Can I say it again? The last thing that any church wants to be is stuck. We don't want to be so stuck in the past that we dismiss any movement toward relevance, and we don't want to be so engulfed in becoming relevant that we dismiss the traditions that got us where we are. And so this is where I think generational collaborations come together, because they help us to appreciate where we've come from, but they also push us into where we need to be. So relevance and tradition do not necessarily have to be competing ideas. We can maintain a sense of relevance and maintain a sense of tradition, bring those two together, and develop a synergy-like environment so that all of the generational voices of the church can be heard. And we're specifically talking about churches. This means that we have to appreciate, again, all the voices rather than attempting to talk over one another, rather than being presumptuous about one another. But we can come together and have a conversation and strengthen the church and move the church in the direction that God would have it to go. The truth is, all of us who are older, and this is the point that I really want to make tonight, and we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but one of the points I want to make is all of us who are older used to be younger. And those who are younger, God willing, will get older, okay? And so that means that none of us have really mastered this, but we've all experienced this. And so when I jump into it tonight, I want to do it just a little bit different than I have been doing. And so just stick with me before we have our conversation. There is one word that continues to come up in our conversations, especially with millennials, and that's this word transparency. If you've been a part of our Bible studies for the last couple of weeks, especially when we've had our panel discussions, that's the one word that continues to surface: transparency. Now, what exactly do we mean by that term? We mean, and I need you to hear me very well, we mean the ability for us to not only talk about our successes, but to talk about our failures. Not only talk about the things we did well at or with, but the things we didn't do so well with. Here's the thing that I want you to get. I want you to get the point that all of us came from somewhere. And some of the places that we've come from and some of the things that we've been through have not been particularly good. We've all hit some bumps in the road. We've all made some mistakes. We've all hung out with some wrong people. We've all done some things that we wouldn't want to appear on the screen in the church. Okay? But sometimes people need to know, and I just need to say this for somebody because it's in my heart. Sometimes people need to know that they can bounce back from a mistake. Sometimes people need to know that they can come back from a mess up. Even if it was a major mess up, they can come back from it. And I think that becomes the important part of having not just conversations, but having transparent conversations with people. I want to use a story tonight. Normally, I kind of go through these lessons very systematically and give you points, but I want to pull from the scriptures a story. So if you have your Bible tonight, I want to share one more generational collaboration for our consideration. Turn with me, if you will, to the book of Ruth. To the book of Ruth, Old Testament, book of Ruth. One of the most, and as you turn there, let me make just a few contextual notes, and then I want to jump into the book of Ruth tonight. And we're going to use Ruth to kind of lead into our conversation. When you look at the book of Ruth, it's one of the most critical lessons that the Old Testament teaches us concerning God's faithfulness is the story between Naomi and Ruth. We also get to see some degree of transparency in this story between these two women. Just to give you some context, Naomi and her husband, Elimelech, along with their two sons, had relocated to a place called Moab because famine had hit Bethlehem. As you continue to read that biblical narrative, Elimelech dies. 10 years later, so does the two now married sons. And Naomi is left with two Moabite daughters-in-law. Naomi decides that she's going to return to the safety of the people she knew and the God she loved. She follows her, watch what happens. Naomi decides she's going back to a familiar place, a place that she knows and a place where she develops her faith, if you will. She's followed her husband out of loyalty, and she's followed him out of obedience, which was a factor in the culture. Don't get upset. That's just a factor of the culture. She follows him out of loyalty and obedience. She tells the wives of her sons to go back home, and she's going back to Bethlehem. I'm in Ruth chapter 1. Orpah decides that she's going to return to her people. But Ruth decides and says to her in verse 16, "Don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me." Right here, you're getting a generational collaboration. Watch the text. Watch the text. Ruth could see faithfulness to God in her mother-in-law, and she shows faithfulness to Naomi. Watch it. She's able to follow her because she sees something in her. I need to say it again. Y'all got to stay with me here. She's able to follow her because she can see something in her. And so Ruth's final and climactic sentence promises loyalty to death and to the grave, including the adoption of Israelite burial customs. Watch the text, it's all there. That's important because not only were these women committed to being faithful to the same God, but they were also committed to being faithful to one another. And from this point in the story, two different generations begin to work in tandem with a common goal in mind. Here's what I need you to say something. Hear me with your heart. We want millennials to follow us. We want millennials to follow us. But let me be real clear. Let me be very clear. They can't follow us if they can't see anything in us. I'm going slow because I don't want you to miss this. I don't want you to miss any of this. You can't expect people to follow you when you're not going anywhere. People need to be able to see something worth following. And so when we talk about this generational collaboration, think about what happened. Ruth could see faithfulness to God in Naomi, and she could be faithful to Naomi because of what she saw in Naomi. See, I'm trying to get y'all to understand that discipleship is not an individual process. It's a communal process. We literally teach people how to follow Christ. We teach people how to be like Christ. I know part of that is the indwelling of the Holy Spirit, but the other part of it is the examples of the people around us. I'm trying to tell you, I told you last time, I watched my grandmother pray, so I learned how. I watched my grandmother live for God, so I learned what living for God looked like by looking at somebody that was doing it. And so Ruth sees something in Naomi that causes her to want to follow her. And here's the thing I'm trying to get you to understand. As those of us who are older, the older generation of church, what is it that we're demonstrating that would even make a millennial want to follow us? Ask yourself the question. If they had the ability to be just like you, what would that look like? That's important. That's important because from this point, two generations began to work in tandem with a common goal. They were two women living without the protection or the provision of male guardianship. Commonly held beliefs about women in ancient Israel seemed to view women as if they were of little importance. But when you read the book of Ruth, you see something different. You see something that's antithetical, if you will, to the culture of the time. Come on, stay with me. Naomi and Ruth lived in a community where women had no trade or no sustainable way to provide for themselves. But guess what? When the younger, Lord help me, when the younger is following the older leads the younger one to a blessing. Okay, all right, y'all ain't here. Y'all ain't here. So you gotta understand that when we start dealing with these generational collaborations, part of what makes a generational collaboration successful is this: I'm better because I've been around you. Y'all missed me. Y'all missed it. How are we making other people better? How are we enriching the lives of other people? Stay with me. Naomi has a relative on her husband's side named Boaz, who owns a field where barley is being harvested. She tells Ruth, glean in Boaz's field. Watch this collaboration, y'all. Watch how this works. She says to Ruth, glean in Boaz's field. Boaz begins to ask about her, and his associates begin to tell him the stuff they knew about Ruth and how hard she worked. Boaz meets her and tells her, stay in the field, and that he was praying that the Lord would bless her. And the Lord blessed her, and she continued to work hard. Watch this. Now, that might seem like a story of a relationship between two women or a story of a woman stepping out in faith, working hard to get ahead in life. But what Ruth had accomplished was amazing, y'all. It was amazing. The quantity she gathered was really impressive because she was working hard, especially for a gleaner who was coming behind harvesters. Seeing what Ruth brought home, Naomi began to bless the man who had allowed Ruth to work in the field. Y'all got to read this story. When Ruth tells Naomi who she was working for, Naomi becomes overcome with gratitude because the man was a relative. Ruth chapter 2, verse 20 is where you get this term kinsman redeemer. A kinsman redeemer in Israel culture and by law had the responsibility to care for the widow of a relative and then produce an heir for the deceased relative if he was next in line. Watch this. Two Hebrew words translate redeemed. The second word that I want you to focus on is this word goel. It's the Hebrew word goel. It was used in this situation. Goel is a technical legal term related specifically to Israelite family law. A kinsman, a kinship term, it denotes that the nearest relative is responsible, come on y'all, for the economic well-being of a relative, in this case, the widow of a deceased man who has no offspring. Y'all need to catch this story. Y'all need to catch this story because now you have an older person showing a younger person how to maneuver in life. Make long story short, the power of this story is the intergenerational workings of two women, Naomi and Ruth. Because Naomi decides to be faithful once again to her God, her daughter-in-law chooses to do the same. I gotta ask the question, when younger people are looking at older generations, can they see your faithfulness to God? Can they see your relationship with God? Can they see how important a relationship with God is? Their faithfulness to God and their trust in God, watch this, y'all, leads to the birth of a son. Y'all missing this. Lord, help me. Their faithfulness to God and their trust in God leads to the birth of a son, not only for Boaz and Ruth, but for Naomi. Because the son that is born is going to be benefit to both women. You got to read this text. Because the story does not end in the last verse of Ruth's book. It's really just the beginning. Naomi took the child in her arms, cared for the child as her own, because now she's teaching a younger woman, oh Lord, how to raise a child properly. Come on, how to raise a child. She took the child in her arms, cared for it as her own, and the women living there said, Naomi has a son. And they named him Obed. Oh, Jesus, come on. Obed is the father of Jesse. Jesse is the father of David. Y'all, Jesus comes out of the lineage of David. Y'all hear what I'm saying? When you follow the right people, when you got the right mentors, when you got somebody that you can see God in, not only will it cause you to become a blessing, but it will cause many others to be blessed because of you. One generation, faithfulness, obedience, love between two generations lead to the birth of a lineage that would bring hope to future generations. One generation has wisdom and experience. Other generation has strength and wherewithal. I'm trying to get you to understand how critical generational collaboration is. Because it's not just about what we do today. It's about what will become of future generations. It's about how we can become a blessing to future generations. Now, here's the question. And this is how we're going to kind of center our conversation. Here's the question, both of the text and of us. What is it that made Ruth stay with Naomi? Come on, think with me. What is it that made Ruth stay with Naomi? The answer to the question is real simple. And I hope somebody writes this down. It's one word. What made Ruth stay with Naomi? The answer to the question is simple. Here it is. Substance. The thing that makes Ruth stay with Naomi is substance. She saw something worth following. Here's a bit of research that you might find interesting. And I found this real interesting. I was doing some reading on millennials, and this is what I found out. Millennials are finding themselves increasingly drawn to high church traditions. That kind of caught me off guard. Millennials are increasingly drawn to high church traditions. Why is it? Why is that? And then it all became clear to me. Because ancient forms of liturgy seem so unpretentious and so unconcerned with being cool, but focused on authenticity. Can I give it to you another way? Millennials are finding themselves increasingly drawn to high church traditions because the worship has meaning. We just not keeping people in church all day for nothing. We just not sitting in a worship service to hear somebody. Okay, let me not do that one. We're not sitting in church listening to people talk unnecessarily. Let me say it like that. Millennials want to know that I'm sitting in church and something is happening, and what's happening means something. The music means something. The way we have church means something. The preaching makes sense. They need something of substance. Not to come, because when it doesn't have substance, you don't want to leave church. You don't want to leave service where you've been sitting in service for 2 hours and feel like you just wasted 2 hours of your time. Come on, somebody. Come on. I know that's hard. I know that's hard. But you got to understand, people come to church to have a transformational experience. They come to church to have an encounter with God. And you can't have all of this unnecessary stuff going on in the worship and expect it to provoke the presence of God. Can I get a witness? You just not going to get the power of God to show up in a church when you having all this unnecessary talking going on that ain't got nothing to do with worship. And so millennials are drawn to something that's unpretentious and See, I've been doing the research, and the research is showing me, I know you in a lot of millennial setting, you're getting what we've been talking about last couple of weeks. You're getting, the lights and the smoke and the fog and all of that, and you just kind of thinking that, if I get me some smoke, they're going to come. Or I'm going to get me some lights or one of them balls that fall out the ceiling that make sparkly stuff be on the wall. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Y'all know what I'm talking about. One of them things that it's going to make young folk come to church. But that ain't what the research is showing. The research is showing they just want some substance. They just want some meaning. They want it to be unpretentious. They want it to be, what we think millennials want is cool. But that ain't it. They want to come to church and feel like they've been in church. They want to come to church and have an encounter with God. I mean, we talk about God being real. Our services need to be structured where it leaves room and space for people to have a personal encounter with God, even though they're doing it in a corporate setting. Now, I hope you're keeping up with some terms that I'm giving you, because I'm going to give you some more. Let me give you some more terms before we have our conversation. Transparency, authenticity, substance, communication. Those are some terms I need you to, especially those of us who are older generation. I need you to get this. I need you to write this down. Transparency, authenticity, substance, communication. What millennials really want from the church, watch this, is not necessarily a change in style, but rather a change in substance. Millennials want to be known for what they stand for and not what they stand against. That's why younger people are drawn to Black Lives Matter movement. Because while the church is arguing about the fact that it didn't start in church, millennials are seeing the substance of it. They're seeing the meaningfulness of it. They're seeing the purpose of it. One of the things that I think we got to get away from the church, because I know probably none of y'all just watching me is going to agree with me, but let me go on and put this out here. Church folk can be some of the most judgmental people. Can I say it one more time? So I know you're going to disagree, but church people can be some judgmental people. And they can be judgmental in the sense that they act like they ain't never done nothing wrong. And this becomes a tremendous turnoff for people. Millennials are not leaving because of the lack of the cool factor. They're leaving because, guess what? They can't find Jesus. Oh, here we go. They come to the place where you're supposed to be able to find Jesus, and they can't find him because they have to wade through all of our stuff to even try to get to him. So what older generations, the greatest generation, 1901, 1924, the traditionalists, 1925, 1945, the baby boomers, 1946, 1964, Generation X, 1965, 1981. What they can do for those who come behind them is remind them of the substantive things of the faith and the realities of life. It's troublesome, and this is not just millennials, it's troublesome for some people to really understand. And here's another point that I need you to get. When we do talk about millennials, we're talking about the most degreed generation in American history. Did y'all hear what I said? So it's troubling for millennials in particular to divorce their theology from the reality of racism, xenophobic, dwindling economy, to marry a fantastical pie in the sky, euphoric feeling that cannot even transcend the threshold of the sanctuary. Millennials cultivate a faith that speaks to societal realities. The other thing that I learned about millennials. Millennials, they don't see the need to divorce social reality from theological truth. Because if your Jesus can't provoke you to help somebody in need, what kind of Jesus do you have? Come on, somebody. If your salvation only works at 410 Fulton, oh, Jesus, help me here, but it don't work nowhere else, what kind of salvation do you have? You know, you say stuff like, you don't cuss you in church. Don't cuss, period. Come on, y'all. Oh, you don't tell a lie. You know you in church. Stop lying, period. So what we've got to understand is this is not just about what we do in here. It's about what we do when we leave here. It's about who we are when we leave here. And trust me when I tell you, millennials are not just watching you in church. Oh, y'all don't want to talk about that? They watching you when they see you in Safeway. They watching you when they see you at Starbucks. They watching you when they see you wherever you are. So millennials don't want to engage in conversations about building for our destination as if dangers are not on our route. What do you mean, Bishop? Tell me the truth about how you got where you are. Stop painting the politically correct picture. Stop leaving out the stuff. Oh, Lord. The streets are real. They're flooded with blood of slaughtered victims of state-sponsored violence and vigilantism. Church needs to say something, and millennials expect us to say something. Here is how we know we still have hope. Millennials in particular seek spaces of refuge, and that's why there's still hope for the black church in particular. And I know some of y'all don't like this term, black church. Why it got to be the black church? Why it just can't be the church? Well, that's a history lesson that I ain't got time to teach right now. Millennials have remained at least on the fringes in a way that white millennials have not, because white believers have never had or needed the same spaces of refuge that people of color have come to rely on. The church, for black people, has always been a place of refuge. Everything we have as a people of color came from the church. Our HBCUs started in basements of churches. Our social programs that we engage in started in churches. Some of our most articulate people who are now famous people started in churches. All of our music, come on y'all, most of our music, the majority of our music started in churches. So church has always been a place of refuge for us. It's always been that. So there's still a place for the relevant black church. And while it may not be easy as it was in prior generations to retain the participation of millennials, it's possible. It's possible. All we need to do is have a conversation. How do we know we still have hope? If we look at our lives, we have to understand that the God who is able to get them through is the same God that's getting us through. We arguing with each other like we serving different gods. We having conversations like we not serving the same Jesus. But I just really need somebody to get happy right quick, because the same God that got them through all of the stuff they've been through, slavery, Jim Crow, mass incarceration, all of those, the same God that got them through. Guess what? It's the same God that's going to get us through. We're not saying that there is, why are we saying that there is an identification with Jesus' suffering that is uncanny in African American Christian tradition? Come on, y'all. It's right there. Not just that. Jesus suffered so we can live. He presented a model. Somebody's got this, oh Lord, somebody has got to say something. Somebody's got to be praying. Somebody's got to be leading. That's substantive. We're getting ready to have a conversation. We're going to have a conversation. But this is the type of work that African American Christian tradition gives us. And I think it's something that the tradition can bequeath to all believers. As a people, we know how to suffer and survive. Guess what we got to do? We got to pass that on. We got to pass that on. I said that's the substance that's necessary that gives authenticity to our faith. So we're going to have a conversation right here. We have some guests who are coming, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this authenticity. We're going to talk a little bit more about what our millennials are looking for, what they're looking for in our older generations. What is it that they would like to see? And so we're going to have that conversation. So stay tuned and join us for this conversation. Don't check out on us. Stay right there. We're going to have this conversation.
Bishop Thomas, thank you. And joined with us this evening with Bishop Thomas and I is Reverend Jenny Green, that's on here with us. And we also have Anissa Atkins that's here. So previous nights, you guys saw that we had some millennials that was on the panel with us, and then another time we had Reverend Connie and Reverend Dr. Fletcher that was up here. But tonight, we actually have a combination of both up here with Bishop Thomas and I, so this should be a great discussion. So I want to start off with this train of thought. So Bishop Thomas has been talking about collaboration between the generations. Mm-hmm. And the first, we can just use this to get the conversation started tonight, is how do we have intergenerational conversations or mentoring or counseling without robbing the individual, of their own identity, or even without listening with judgment as well. So I'll throw it out to you guys, but let's just say that you guys were in a mentoring relationship. How is it that we can ensure that we don't rob each other of their own true identity and at the same time just bringing that judgment?
Well, I think that as a younger person, I think first of all, I have to know, okay, I'm going to this person for help, so I need to be open to what they're going to say to me. I know if I need help for something and I go talk to a more experienced staff member, I need to be respectful of their ideas because I'm asking for their help. And then I think on the other end, I think for older people, it's important for them to remember that that we are, how should I put this? That we are able to do the things that we're being asked to do. You know what I mean? That there's a level of respect between the two parties where one person's not looking at one person saying, well, you're a baby, and the other person's not looking at the other person and saying, well, you're an old geezer, to you, for lack of a better word. You know what I mean? But there has to be that respect between the two parties that you're both going to get something valuable out of that mentorship connection.
That's good. I like, we go back to that substance thing, that whole idea that millennials or younger people, period, are looking for a substantive connection. And they're looking for a substantive connection in a way that does not rob them of their individuality. I've got to appreciate you for what you bring to the table. Mm-hmm. Even if the way you do it is not the way I do it, I've got to appreciate the fact that you can do it.
Right.
Even if it doesn't look the way I'm anticipating or wanting it to look. And I think that's where we start robbing young people of their individuality. Because what we really want to do is not allow them the space to become like Jesus. Right. We really want them to become like us. We really want them to do it our way.
Right.
And not the way that their own ingenuity and creativity would allow them to do it. So how do we kind of overcome this mentality that you got to do it my way or it's wrong?
I think one of the things that needs to happen is the relationship building first.
Okay.
Before you even begin delving into anything else, you have to know that individual. You can't assume anything about that individual, and that begins with listening.
Yes.
And a lot of people, they hear, but they don't listen. Mm-hmm. It's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people listen or hear to give a response and not to understand.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
And so when you listen, you have to look at the inside of a person. In order to be able to help them, you need to be able to hear what they're saying from their heart. They may not always express it, but sometimes when they come to you, you don't need to have a response. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they just want someone to listen, and that way you get to know that individual. Because I was just talking about that earlier. A lot of times, as older adults, we try to make a little us, and we don't want to make another little us. So when we counsel sometimes younger people, we try to change who they are to make them fit into our mold. But we can't do that because they have a personality they have to maintain. They can still serve Christ with their personality, and we don't have to try to change them into us, because us sometimes is not right. We don't want to make an imitation copy.
Right.
Yeah, that could be a mess.
That can be a mess. So I said the greatest thing that I found is that we need to listen. And don't always think we have to respond, because some people are just listening, not even hearing what you're saying, but formulating in their mind what they're going to say afterwards.
Right.
And so if we listen to them and start looking at them from the inside first and finding out what they're about, because you can't show anybody anything if you know nothing about them.
Right.
Wow.
And I think that that's where we need to really start building that relationship and listening to one another. The millennials listening to the older generation and listening to the millennials.
Yeah.
We come together, as we talked about, intergenerational.
Yeah.
Then we find what we have in common. We can work together on those gifts and, spiritual gifts or whatever talents we have that are in common, and we learn to work together with one another, because now we're building a
Yeah,
relationship.
and I think that's what happens in the story with Ruth and Naomi. You got two different generations here, but they're working together for one common goal. And I think even in church, it's the same way. We're not competing against one another.
Right.
We're trying to make what we have better, stronger, more substantive, more vital. And I think that's the point we miss, because we see the church as being ours. This is my church. We become territorial because we've been here for years and years and years and years and years. This is my church. This is my seat. This is my thing. And I think it sends a bad message to even young people about even what the church is and what the purpose of the church is.
Yeah. You've been talking about substance and that phrase, intergenerational. You had it on the slide, working together. There was this book, You Lost Me.
Yeah.
The book that Bishop Thomas had recommended, a book. Tremaine went out and bought it, and I've been reading it and using it in some of our classes. But one of the things they talked about, and Bishop, you talked about, is the church is a partnership of generations fulfilling God's purpose in their time. And so a lot of times we look at a generation and being this age demographic, but really a generation is a group of people working together at a specific time in history. So I just wanted to kind of throw out the question, like, how do we, because a lot of times there's a lot of segregation in church, right? Separation, segregation. But how do we begin to come together in generations? I think you were talking about like or similar things. So if, there's a millennial going to college or something like that for legal, finding somebody that's in the church just like that. But is it going to be easy, and how do we do it? If we can just kind of talk about that. How do we do the intergenerational within the church?
Yeah. Let me muddy the water a little bit, just a little bit. When you think about church, what do you think? We call it developing an ecclesiology. But just real simple, when you think about church and what church is and what church means to you, what comes to your mind?
I think probably the first couple things that come to my mind are probably fellowship,
Okay.
and then being able to make that connection with God.
Okay.
Probably the two biggest things, because sometimes it is harder to get yourself in that spirit of worship sometimes when you're at home and there are distractions, but when you can come to a place where everyone is here for the same thing, it just makes it feel like a community of people here, and just a spiritual community.
Yeah, I like that. Did y'all hear what she said? You're a millennial, right?
Yes.
Did you hear what she said? Did y'all hear what she said? She just said, you can't get the same thing at home that you get in the building. That came from a millennial, y'all. And y'all keep trying to accuse millennials of not wanting to come to church. You got it from a millennial. Everybody got quiet.
But it's amazing, too, because the first two things you said are the very same two things when I think of church. That's the very thing is that I come for worship and I come for fellowship. And I would even say a third. I know that when I come, I'm going to hear God speak to me about me for something that's going to get me better. Because every time I come, like I say, I get cut every time I come. So, you know, I enjoy coming. And this wasn't like, as for me, people assume that I've been in church all my life. But no, I didn't come to church till I was 13. I was a Jehovah's Witness.
Wow.
My mother had us in Jehovah's Witness, but it was something in me that kept saying, this is not right. This is not right. And it was me following my aunt, watching my aunts. And they came one day and said, you want to go to church? And they took me to church. And so that's when I started coming. I used to watch them reading their Bible, singing, praying all the time. You know, of course, when I was young, we used to laugh at them because we thought it was kind of funny. But then we used to, you know, just watching them. And then finally, them introducing me, and I followed them. And I've been going the way ever since. But we have the same, and that's how we can have the same ideas of what church is about, but we may do it a little different.
Right.
But it's still the same.
That's that intergenerational collaboration.
Right.
And see, you all may think that this is not staged. They don't even know the questions that they're going to get asked. And so you're literally hearing their heart. And so you're actually watching this whole intergenerational thing play out unscripted.
Right.
That this whole thing just play out unscripted because both generations have something valuable to offer.
Right.
Both have something valuable to offer. I kept telling you, even in my lesson tonight, this is the most degreed generation in American history. This is the most educated generation in American history. And it would just be sad. It would be sad to allow the academic acumen, if you will, of younger people to be such a threat that we dismiss the very valuable thing, the very valuable resource that we have sitting right here in front of us.
And here's this question ties into that. How can older generations respect millennials as the adults that they are instead of seeing them as kids to be told what to do?
Wow.
Either one of y'all take that. So again, how can older generations respect millennials as the adults they are instead of seeing them as kids to be told what to do?
We just talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah.
We did.
That's why I want to bring that out.
Especially when there's people be chosen for different ministries or whatever, they'll choose someone else older because maybe you said they do a lot of decorations in their house, but they'll look over a millennial, like you said, the degree that could have a decorating degree or whatever degree, they tend to look over it. And then another thing I noticed that they do, they'll see a younger person do a certain thing, so they try to put them in that box when that may not be what their gifting or calling is, but because they do something well, they tend to want to, well, you do this, well, you do this, but it may not be what they're called to do or their actual gift to do.
Or even their passion.
Or even their passion, but and I am guilty because I will look at like Anissa, I'll look at Candace and Valerie and all them, and I say, oh, look at those, remember they were little, and sometimes in my mind, I have to admit, I still see them as those little children who grew up in the church, not realizing that now they're adults, they have families, and I think that's one of the things that the older generation have to realize, that these are adults. They are not young children who need to be teaching place setting, how to set a table, or anything like that. They are grown. They can do the work. They should be on every auxiliary of the church. Because as we were saying earlier, if you want to do something we've been doing long ago for this group, You need their input.
Right, right.
They have to have input in it. You need to know what they want. It's like doing market research.
That's right.
You don't start doing something until you find out whether somebody wants to do it. So if you want the millennials to participate, you have to go to them and ask them, what do you want to see? And then, work together to do that.
Yeah.
But respect
Right.
the fact that they're adults.
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing your input on that conversation.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, and I would say I have also experienced that where people look at me and say, oh, well, I've known you since before you were born, and you are still 6 years old. And when very clearly I'm not, I'm working, I'm teaching, I have a whole career that I'm establishing for myself. And so I think that first it's going to have to be openness to accept younger people as adults. So the older generations need to just start with openness, I think, because it can be a lot to make that shift. I understand. So openness is first, and then I think it's just really open. It's just being willing to watch what they're doing, watch what we are doing, and seeing that, we're not, 6 years old anymore. We're able to take on these more leadership roles in the church. We're able to, I know for me, I graduated from college, the men swooped me up real quick. And that's how I started working with them, because they asked for my assistance, and we had growing pains at first because I am much younger than they are, and they had to get used to the way I do things. I had to try to incorporate the way they do things to make them feel comfortable.
Right.
And so as we've gotten more used to each other, we've been able to create an environment that works well for all of us. And they've become more open to singing different styles of music and things like that.
Right.
And I've definitely learned about other styles that, maybe I don't listen to as often, but because they bring these pieces to me, we're able to build, as Miss Debbie was saying, that community in our choir. So that's just, a personal example of mine.
That's good. That's good, because that community thing is one of the things that I'm really trying to push and promote. That community, we've got to get away from this individual mentality, this individualistic mentality, and really understand the power of community, because I know we say it, but we truly are better together than we are apart.
Right.
We're stronger together than we are apart. I may not be able to do it like you, but I can push you to do it. I can encourage you to do it. And then when I see you hit a bump in the road and you get discouraged, I can come right alongside you and say, no, you got to get up. You can do this, because I've been there.
Right.
I've experienced that failure. I've experienced that bump in the road. I know you can overcome that.
Right.
That's how community works. We help each other be better. We don't tear each other down. We help each other be better.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think and that was a great example.
It was.
And it was interesting because Anissa came from college, and I was like, I'm going to let Anissa just kind of take a break for a moment. And immediately the men's choir grabbed her, and, she
I think
directed the
they
choir.
begged me to come for probably 2 or 3 months before I came to a rehearsal. Yes.
So it's a great example, but, for me, I'm over here with the children and youth ministry like, dang, I should have,
Yeah.
But we have to, I know there's times that the millennials are called on sometimes, can you just do this, and then backed up from it, kind of, let me put you on stage for a moment, and then that's it. But what we do have to do more as a community is invite the millennials to the table, and vice versa as well. If we are doing an event as young adults, invite, and this is what we're doing here, older persons to the table as well. And that's the way that we're going to get those intergenerational relationships to take place.
Right.
I was talking to Anissa earlier, because both of y'all are right in the midst of the school system dealing with this whole hybrid, what's going on. And I was asking her, how are you, because you're a music teacher, right?
Right, yeah.
So she's a music teacher, and she's dealing with the tension that I'm dealing with my kids at home, because she has some kids that are virtual, and some kids that are physically in her classroom with her. And so you, or older generation, might be at home struggling with your grandkids or even your children, trying to figure out, how do I get them to stay focused? Here's a millennial right here that's right in the midst of
Struggling
it.
to get them to do the same thing, honestly. Like,
That we can reach out to.
right.
So when we're having panel discussions or we're having parenting sessions, we can invite the millennial, and just because, you know, you remember her when she was 6 years old and you're still calling her 6 does not mean that she doesn't have valuable information to bring to the table.
Yeah. Can you imagine where the church would be right now in the middle of this pandemic if it was not for our millennials?
Right.
How many times have we demonized technology?
Yeah.
Come on, y'all.
Yeah.
That's what's saving you. It's saving you.
How many times have we talked about how, you know, Facebook is demonic? Now the only way we getting our services out,
We on there.
you know, and Instagram and YouTube, and y'all need to stay off all that devilment. You know, they used to call it devilment. Yeah, y'all need to stay off all of that devilment. Now that devilment is how our folk are getting services.
Yes, indeed.
Because they can't come to the building.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, where would we be? Where would the church be right now if it wasn't for that part of our community of faith saying, guess what, y'all? We ain't got to stop having church.
Right.
We don't have to shut down.
Right.
We can still do ministry. We just have to reimagine it. We just have to do it in a different way.
Right.
And I believe that's some of that. Now, some of us you may have to help some of us. we might not be able to get it on the phone. You might have to, you might have to come hook up the TV for us to get it. But guess what? Guess what's happening? The world is being impacted with the gospel in the middle of a pandemic.
Man.
That's right.
Y'all missed what I just said.
It's
I
going-
said
it's
the
going
world
Yes, indeed.
is being impacted by the gospel
Right.
in the middle. More people are getting the gospel right now than almost at any other period in history. And our buildings are empty.
Yeah.
The building is empty. And more people are getting the gospel than at any other point
Wow.
in history.
I wanted to talk about this one thing, and I know we are coming down at the end of time. Reverend Debbie, you had mentioned it's like the more we have these discussions, the more we find out about each other. So this area of first be honest, it's very challenging to sit in a relationship and you be the one first to say, this is me. Transparency, authentic, being authentic. But you talked about it, and I think I remember you sharing with me about Jehovah's Witness before, but it was a reminder like, wow, because honestly, I thought you've been in church, pretty much your whole life, right?
I was a heathen.
She's a heathen.
You're making people nervous now.
Not like that.
Yeah, you're making them nervous because we can't handle that kind of transparency. That's what we were just talking about.
But and that's the thing, because it's if I'm the first one to be transparent, what will you think of me now?
Right.
Go ahead.
But it's like with transparency, you don't have to tell everything.
You don't, yeah.
Some stuff you leave under the blood, but there's some things that people need.
Even under the blood. I like that.
There's some things that people need
New
because
shirt.
I come across people every day that have certain issues, and I'll share something
Sure.
that I've struggled with, and to let them know that they're not by themselves.
Yeah.
Because my thing, the bottom line is we need to realize we need each other.
Yeah.
We have to have each other for it to work both ways. But transparency, that's why I said you don't have to tell everything. You tell as much as you need to tell.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are thinking that if I say something, I'm going to be judged. Now you're going to look at me different because I had an issue. But had we had technology, as I told you earlier, back in the 1920s, we'd see a whole lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's just what you're willing to share with people, what you're comfortable with sharing, that let people know that, yes, I have Reverend on my name, but I'm human.
Sure.
I make mistakes. I've done some things in my past that I regret. And because I went through it and I overcame it, and you're going through it, you can overcome it.
You
And
can
then I can
overcome
tell
it
them
too.
the way I overcame it.
Right,
Right.
right.
And so, yeah, I'm transparent all the time, sometimes maybe to a fault.
You know, I have one more question. I know we got to go, but
Yeah.
you know, millennials, from my experience, and just are just a lot less judgmental than older generations. Do you attribute that to something?
I don't know. I don't know if I attribute it to something. I know for me personally, if you're doing something that is not right, it is not my job to fix you. You know what I mean? If I disagree with what you're doing, and I say I would like, hey, why don't you come to church with me? You know, just come. And if you give your life to Christ, my job is done. It's God's job to deal with you at that time. I shouldn't be judging your struggle because I have my own stuff to deal with. So, you know, I feel like if I bring you to the church and I say, let me walk you down, and then you accept Christ, then I feel like after that, my hard work is done. Then I'm just there to be a support system. I'm not there to judge. God is there to deal with that.
You said something that it is not my job to fix you.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is something. It is not. It's my job to get you where you need to be, so you can be fixed.
Right.
But it's not my job to fix you.
That's big.
That's powerful. That's.
But I have
that's
a
just
question.
powerful.
Could it be because of the way the older generation was raised in the church? The way they were raised in the church is why, you know, they judge more because of the way they were taught. Like you couldn't wear pants, you couldn't wear this, you had to dress this way, you had to do this. Could it be because of the way they were raised, and they expect us to be in the church what they were in the church? Well, I'm saying I'm one of them. Let me wait, I'm one of them.
Intergenerational.
But I wasn't in the church, so
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but I know,
Right.
like with my grandmother,
But, yes.
with their age, they would look at some of the
Yeah.
millennials now and think they're wild because they had to have a hat on every Sunday.
Yeah.
They couldn't have their head uncovered. You couldn't do this on Sunday. If you saw you playing cards, you were a devil. You know, stuff like that. Could it be because of the way they were brought up in the church that they look at the millennials now and say, look, you're doing a little too much?
I think it's cultural difference.
Yeah. I
think
You
so.
know what
Yes.
I mean? Like the
Cultural,
way
that's
that
it.
we live now is a little bit different, and especially now that we're all impacted by technology, it's just the way that we live now is very different. And if, you know, I feel like for me, I still remember VHS tapes. We had big, you know, video cameras, all that kind of stuff. And so like when I look at my students who are in third grade and they're like, oh, well, I watched this on YouTube and I did this by myself and I'm doing this, this, and this. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm only 25 and I feel that way when I look at, you know, 10-year-olds. So I think that just that general shift in culture creates, you know, something that has the potential to be judgmental. Because I'm sure, you know, I probably do the same thing when I look at kids that are younger than me and I'm like, okay, but I think it's just human nature a little bit to be judgmental. And then as things change that we're not used to, we're like, oh, well, that's different. But different isn't always bad. It's just different.
Different is not always
That's
bad.
That's right.
That's
That's
right.
that's a good
Yeah.
place right there.
So finally, two things. Technology accelerates generations, and just the amount of access that we have to information now, if not careful, if we don't begin to start bridging the gaps, the gap will widen because of technology. And then within the church is a culture, but we
It
have
is.
cultures within cultures.
Right.
And that's the tension that we're feeling, is that there's a diversity of cultures within one culture, and we're just feeling that. But if we just relax,
There you
just
go.
calm down.
Just relax.
Yeah.
Just relax. Well, thank you all so much for Reverend Debbie Finney-Green, Sanisa Atkins. Thank you all so much for sharing our time tonight. This is what we need, and we're going to do more of this, because I think in order for our church to continue to grow, to continue to develop, to continue to be a leader in the community, we've got to learn how to appreciate all of the voices. Because the last thing that I ever want to see happen to Calvary Baptist Church is it become a shell of what it used to be. This church has been a leader in this community. for 136 years. I mean, we've been a staple in the community. People have always known us, for our community outreach, our community service. I don't want to be sitting around 30 years from now looking at a congregation and saying, y'all remember when we used to? I want to be sure that we remain vibrant, that we will remain healthy, that we will remain relevant, that we will remain theologically accurate, all of those things. And I think we can do that. We just have to talk to one another, appreciate one another, see each other's individuality, and recognize each other's value. And I think that will keep us here as a healthy, vibrant church for another 136 years if Jesus chooses not to come back before then. So thank you all for your time tonight. Hopefully the conversation has blessed you, and we'll continue to have these conversations in some different forms and some different venues. But this is the intention. This is the intention. This is my intention, even as the pastor of this church, for us to continue to bridge those gaps between generations so that our church remains healthy and strong and vibrant. So let me pray with you tonight, and then we will bid you farewell for Bible study until 2021, the Lord willing. Father, we thank you tonight for your goodness, your mercy. We thank you for the ability to have some transparent conversations, some real conversations that meet us where we are. And Father, I pray that those who are watching, who may be struggling with all of this, who's trying to wrap their mind around all of this intergenerational collaboration, I pray, God, that you will touch our hearts and allow us to know that there's not reason to be intimidated or fearful or jealous or territorial or even entitled. But God, that you will help us to understand that we all bring something to the table, and help us to be able to appreciate one another's value and one another's worth, regardless of our age. And so, Father, we pray that you'll continue to strengthen us and grow us, develop us, and move us forward. And God, will always give you praise for that. We'll give you glory for that. And we'll give you honor for that. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.